morning, this is Kelly from Appalachian Memory Keepers, and this morning I am at the site in Monroe County, West Virginia, of the oldest Methodist church west of the Blue Ridge Divide. Let's go in and explore.
Welcome to Old Rehoboth. My name is Anita Tracy, and I'm the caretaker here. And this is the oldest standing Protestant church west of the Allegheny Mountains. It was dedicated in June of 1786. And if you go back up the road here to Route 3 and take a left headed east, about a mile and a half down the road, you'll come to a place called Keenan. Keenan is important to us here. The Keenans were early settlers and they were Irish Roman Catholics. By about 1784, a gentleman by the name of James Christie moved into this area and he brought a bunch of Methodists with him. Those Methodists met in their homes. They had what they called Methodist Society meetings, Methodist band meetings. Christie and another fella by the last name of Hemprel were what they called lay exhorters, and they conducted those worship meetings. Edward Keenan got to be friends with those Methodists, and it wasn't very long then till he became sympathetic to the Methodist movement. He felt like the Methodists needed a better place to worship. So he wrote a letter to Bishop Francis Asbury, one of the first two bishops of Methodism, and asked Asbury if he, Keenan, could donate some land for a church. And so this church is on the 5 acres he donated. He also asked for Asbury to send a full-time preacher here for the Methodist. Asbury sent a man by the name of William Phoebus. William Phoebus was a doctor, he was an author, he came here, he met with folks in their cabins, and he was their preacher. While he was here, several of the families, including the Keenans, got together and they built this church. It's about double the size a log cabin would have been. And you notice how it's down here in this little dip. Well, that's strategic. It's something called reverse slope defense, because there were still skirmishes between the Native Americans and the settlers were somewhat afraid. So they built down here so that if anyone popped up over these ridges, they could see them before they got here. There used to be gun ports up in the top. I think I remember them from the 1980s, but I've been informed my memory is faulty. But this did double as a fort a few times. We United Methodists are not proud of how we treated our Native brothers and sisters, but we can't change our history either. We can, however, change our present. A few years ago, we moved all these picnic tables out to the side, and we had a Native American drum circle here, a day of history and storytelling, and we closed with a service of remembrance, repentance, and reconciliation. But that's why the church is where it is. Now, above the door, there's a plaque. And on that plaque, it says that Francis Asbury was here for the dedication in 1786. He kept really good records, and when they got to study in his journal, he wasn't anywhere near here in 1786. He wasn't here until 2 years later. By that time, he'd sent a new pastor here, a man by the name of John Smith. John Smith rode his horse from Baltimore, Maryland here. It took him 3 weeks to get here. When he got here, this was the heart of the Greenbrier Circuit. We're in what's called the sinks of the Greenbrier through here. It's a limestone karst area. There's actually a cave down over the hill there. But he was our first circuit rider, and a circuit rider would ride their horse from preaching point to preaching point. In those days, preaching points were just people's cabins. So he might ride up to someone's cabin, the people would gather in, he would preach, he would spend the night and go on the next place the next day. That sounds easy when I say it, but sometimes the snow was chest high to the horse. Sometimes people didn't agree with his theology, so they gathered in to beat him up. It was a difficult task. But the main thing John Smith did for us here was he established a circuit that included part of 4 present-day Virginia counties, all of Monroe County, West Virginia, the county you're in now, all of Greenbrier County, the county to our north, and then the southern part of Pocahontas County, which is my home county, but I'm from the northern end. It didn't go that far. But it was such a big area, once it was well established, it took a month to get around that circuit. Well, when this church got put on that month-long circuit, seeing as how it was the heart of the Greenbrier circuit, it deemed a Sunday morning worship service. So the first Sunday of the month they called Rehoboth Day. Saturday night, people gathered out here on the grounds and they camped. Sunday morning, they opened the doors at 7 o'clock. Let's go see what they went into. So they would come in here. They would open these doors at around 7 o'clock. Come on in and have a seat. So they would come in here at 7 o'clock, and sometimes there would be more people than there was room. In that case, the preacher would stand over there in the doorway, and he would preach inside a little bit, and he would preach outside a little bit. The men and the boys worshiped upstairs because that's where those gun ports were. And the girls and the women would worship downstairs. Now later on, another thing we're not real proud of is how we treated the slaves. But by the time the slaves began to worship here, there was no longer any threat of attack. So at that point, the white men and boys moved downstairs and the slaves worshiped upstairs. Now the preacher would get up into the pulpit. This is the pulpit here. Now this pulpit you can see is made out of milled lumber. Anything in here made out of milled lumber, of course, is reproduction. But the preacher would get up in the pulpit and he would preach for an hour to an hour and a half. Then he would call on brother so-and-so. Then he would call on brother so-and-so and so on and so forth till about 12:30. Now they did sing. They did what I call lining out. The song leader would sing a line and the congregation would sing it back. I don't know about you all, but I think if I were in here at 7 in the morning and I stayed till 12:30 in the afternoon, I would fall asleep. Only thing is, they tell me all but 2 of these benches are original, and they're kind of uncomfortable. You're sitting on the most uncomfortable one in the building because it's pitched forward a little bit, but that might keep you awake. But if that failed to keep you awake, now those preachers were pretty fiery. Story is, one preacher was up in the pulpit preaching. He went to make a point. He brought his fist down onto what was a book board that ran across, and they say it just splintered. So those preachers would keep you awake. But if that still failed to keep you awake, up in the museum, there's a long stick called a prompter, and you were prompted to stay awake with that stick so you wouldn't have fallen asleep. Plus, once a month, you were excited to see all your friends and all your relatives. And then that circuit rider, why, he'd been all the way around that great long circuit. He might come in here and tell you something like, y'all need to be aware up at Little Levels, there's been an uprising. And over on Anthony's Creek, Susie Jones, she got the prettiest baby you ever did see. Back there in the back, those wise men, well, they're getting ready to move down here to Drop and Lick, and they need someone to help them build their cabin. So you not only got the word of the Lord, you got the word of the wilderness. You got all the news when you came to church. Well, like I said, this plaque out here above the door, it says Asbury was here in 1786, but we know he didn't come until 1788. When he came here in 1788, he ordained John Smith a deacon, and that was the first Methodist ordination west of the Allegheny Mountains. He came back 4 more times. Every time he came, he brought a famous preacher of the day with him. I think that's probably when they stood there in the doorway. 3 of those times were for Methodist conferences because those circuit riders, they just stayed on their circuit 6 months to 2 years. So when they would come to conference, they would be assigned a new circuit and move on somewhere else. But Francis Asbury was here 5 different times in his lifetime. Also on that plaque out there, it says, when Edward Keenan donated this land, he said, for as long as the grass grows and the water flows, meaning this would be a place of worship basically forever. Well, they worshiped regularly in this building until after the Civil War. That window was not there. You look around and you see there's no place for a fireplace, no place for a stove. They didn't want any smoke giving them away when they first built it. So it was hot in the summer, it was cold in the winter. A little light shone through those gun ports, but they had the light by lanterns. So it was just really uncomfortable. So in 1870, they built a new church up on the hill, kind of out from where the museum is right now. That church had 4 windows, had a stove, and I think those pews even had backs on them. Well, they got up there in all that luxury, and they let this building stand vacant for 56 years. You know what happened? It got in pretty sorry shape. So in 1927, somebody must have looked down here and said, we can't let that building fall down. It's part of our history. It's part of our heritage. So they had a big work day, maybe 2 or 3. They replaced several of the logs. The bulk of the original logs are in this front wall here. But the main thing they did was they put on this brand new roof. So this is a brand new roof in 1927. In 1960, this was named a Methodist Historic Shrine. It was one of 17. 1968, the Methodist churches and the Evangelical United Brethren churches combined to become what we know of today as the United Methodist Church. When that happened, this became a United Methodist Heritage Landmark. We are one of 49, and we're the only one in West Virginia. Then in 1974, this building was placed on the National Registry of Historic Places. 1980, they completed the museum up here. Then in 2007, the Rueton Club from down at Gap Mills, about 8 miles east of here, and the Rueton Club from out at Sinks Grove over on the other side of Union got together and built this lovely picnic shelter up here. Well, we run on donations, which means good and bad things. But the good thing it means, you can reserve this building for a church service or a wedding. You can reserve the picnic shelter for a picnic, family reunion, class reunion, church service, meeting, you name it. We don't charge any set fee. All we ask is a donation from $0 to $1 million or more. It fits everybody's budget. And although we are United Methodist here, our ministry is ecumenical. This year we've had the Baptist, the Methodist, the Nazarenes, the Presbyterians. In years past, we've had the Church of God, the Church of Christ, several independent churches. Well, every time we have a service here, we honor Edward Keenan's words, as long as the grass grows and the water flows. So anyway, I'm going to get that out of the way here. This top and bottom piece, I'm not sure if it's original or not, but it continues on out, and it makes your wooden hinges.
Oh, okay.
You can see that the top and bottom piece of the door frame just came out here. They carved here. They drilled a hole or augured a hole and pegged it onto this piece that's pegged onto the door frame.
So the pegs are right there. Are those original or are those reproductions?
I think it's probably original, although this kind of makes me question.
Gotcha.
And then they carved here so that when you open the door up, it pulls up, and when you close it, it pulls down. So it's gravity fed. But you heard no squeaking or squalling whenever I opened it up.
No, better than our modern doors.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, let's look at a couple of graves.
Okay, we'll go out here where the oldest ones are. This is Nancy Keenan's grave, and then this is Edward's grave, and Edward's the one who donated the land. And then there is Elizabeth Wiseman's gravestone.
And who was she? She was the oldest buried here?
It was the oldest grave here, yes. And then her son and her husband, you can see their markers, and those are Revolutionary War markers. All of the military markers are fairly modern. Now, I do know that there are some Union soldiers buried here. There was a lady who was here this year for a picnic, and her mother had shown her some of her relatives' graves, and they were 2 brothers. One fought for the South and one fought for the North. But I don't know of any markers that you can read right now that are Northern markers. And they tend to be buried in family groups. So the Lynches seem to be right here. And this is along, but some of these, I was just talking about Mr. Shirey, and here's his gravestone. But some of these stones like this have someone listed on, this one has someone listed on 3 sides. So there's someone different listed here. So I don't know if they're buried just right here or not.
I hope you enjoyed this tour of the oldest Methodist church west of the Blue Ridge. Thank you so much to our tour guide for giving us such a great tour and sharing so much information with us. If I could ask a favor from each of you, would you please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel? The reason this is so important is it helps tell YouTube that our video is important. It helps with the algorithm. And as a result, they will show it to more people based on the people that like it and comment on it. So the best free thing you can do to help Appalachian Memory Keepers is to like these videos, because it encourages us to keep producing more. We will see you soon. Thank you.